What's going on, everybody? Scott Bogman here for BettingPros to tell you my favorite picks and props for round number 2 of the college football playoff. We got 4 more games to talk about in this one. A lot of player props. Those did pretty well for me. Last week I was 4-1. Picks 1 and 2. Didn't get the Indiana side, obviously. Did not get the under in the Clemson and Texas game like I thought I was going to get. But we did easily hit on it. Penn State minus the points. Touchdown calls just weren't there for me. 0 for 3 on that. But 4-1 on the props here. Curtis Rourke, 215 yards, so he was over. Jeremiyah Love got his all on 1 carry. Wisner was banged up, but still went way over his rushing total. Mitchell Evans for Notre Dame was the one I didn't get because they didn't have to stay point for point with Indiana in that game. But Roderick Daniels, they were playing from behind, so he easily hit his total as well. Remember, you can follow all of my picks and props on the BettingPros app or bettingpros.com/Bogman. You can tail me over there, fade me, however you want to do it. I've been pretty okay this season, kind of down the middle, better on the props recently. So let's get into what I have for this week on the picks. I'm going to lay the 10.5 and take Penn State against Boise State again. I just don't think that Boise State matches up very well, particularly on defense. They've been really terrible tackling this season. They're one of the lowest rated tackling teams that I saw on PFF. I believe they were 133 out of 134. Very, very low. And everyone's concerned about stopping Ashton Jeanty. I don't think anybody stops Ashton Jeanty. I don't think that is what I don't think that's a reasonable expectation for anyone to stop him. I do think he'll be able to run a little bit. His rushing total, I don't know. I think he's either going to go way below it or way ahead of it. But the biggest mismatch in this game is the Penn State offense versus the Boise State defense. So with that in mind, I just think Penn State scores on most of their drives. I think Boise State may have to stall out. And if you do get up on Boise State and make them pass the ball, they're obviously going away from their best playmaker in Ashton Jeanty. So I think Penn State's going to score a decent amount of points. I think they're going to win this one going away, and I think there are going to be mistakes made during the comeback for Boise State, a lot like we saw against SMU last week for the Nittany Lions. Let's go over to Texas minus 13.5 against Arizona State. Not my favorite game here. I'll tell you that my lean is Texas minus 13.5, but my favorite bet is actually the Arizona State team total under 19.5. And maybe I'm overestimating the Longhorns defense. They did give up a lot of yards and points to Clemson last week. 400 yards was the first team. They were the first team to put up 400 yards on Texas all year. But they did it with Klubnik having an absolutely insane second half. I don't think Sam Leavitt has that in him, right? The Longhorns are a little bit banged up, but most of that is on the offensive side. This defense is still very intact. I still believe they're the best defense in the country. I do think that Texas kind of wins this one going away. Again, just like the last game we talked about, this is when you get up on them, you make them pass the ball a little bit more. Now, I do trust in Sam Leavitt a little bit more than I trust in Maddox Madsen for Boise State and them playing comeback. But they're still down their number one playmaker among wide receivers in Jordan Tyson. Guillory's been great. I think he's a pretty solid fill-in, but you're talking about going up against a first-round corner in Barron. So I don't really like the Sun Devils' chances in this game. If they are in this game, it would be Texas screwing it up and turning the ball over, I feel like. So I'm going to take the Arizona State under 19.5 team total in that one. I'm going to give you a lean in the Oregon and Ohio State game. I'm not going to pick this game. This game was super tight the first time they played it at Oregon. We have seen Ohio State be complete Jekyll and Hyde from the Michigan game to the game last week against Tennessee where they just ripped the Volunteers apart. So they're not playing at home in this game, but Oregon barely won at home in the last game. I'm just going to take points. Right now, Oregon is taking 2.5. That's going to be my lean in this game. Again, not officially taking anything in that game. You can check back with us on Monday or Tuesday when the show comes out with myself and Seth and Terrell. So check back then. Maybe I'll have an official pick, but I just don't like that game. In the Notre Dame versus Georgia game, we're going to go under 44.5 in that one. And the reason being, Georgia's offense isn't complete, right? Everyone's talking about how Notre Dame should run away with this game. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I do think that Gunnar Stockton is just such a wild card that we don't know about. I don't want to trust him. This is a very beatable Georgia team this year. They're not the dominant team they have been in the last couple of years. But even being beatable, they still might be the best team in the country. They beat Texas twice. They have, had some really good wins. They won the SEC. I just don't know what we're going to get from Stockton. I do know that Notre Dame hasn't really faced a challenge on offense like they will against Georgia. And Georgia's defense is actually as healthy as it's been pretty much all year right now. Micah Williams, looking like he's 100%. Smile Munden back as well. I think that this defense holds Notre Dame's offense a little bit more than they expect, and we don't know what we're going to get from the offense for Georgia with Gunnar Stockton in their center, right? Carson Beck, not his greatest year, but still very, very experienced. You would obviously prefer to go with a guy with all of that experience over a guy starting his first college football game in the playoffs. So I understand people taking Notre Dame. I just don't know that they have really been challenged. And I know Georgia has. They've passed some and lost some, of course. But in this game, under 44.5 is the way that I'm going to go in it. So let's get to some touchdown picks and props. But before we do, I got to ask you guys, are you looking to up your game in sports betting? Join our exclusive sports betting Discord community at bettingpros.com/chat. Not only can you connect with expert handicappers who provide free picks for the NBA, NFL, MLB, college sports, player props, live betting, and more, but now you can also participate in our weekly community picks, cast your vote, see how your pick stands up against the experts, and track your success. All right, we're going with 4 touchdown calls this week. Number 1, Tyler Warren. It is the worst odds that I'm taking here. It's at minus 155. I believe that was on FanDuel where I saw it. He has a ton of touchdowns this year. He gets them rushing. He gets them receiving. I think they're going to score a bunch against Boise State. So that one's a pretty easy one for me. I like to pair that one with something else that you want to give a little boost. Maybe it's a single game parlay in that Penn State game. Maybe you like Penn State and the Tyler Warren touchdown, something. So I like that to pair with something more than just taking it straight on its own, but I think it's a pretty good bet on its own as well. This one I'm going more out on a limb. Penn State defense is plus 490, another one I saw on FanDuel. The reason I like this one is because if this game plays as the SMU game played, right, which SMU was throwing pick sixes and, Kevin Jennings just had a really bad game in that one. I don't necessarily think that is how the Penn State defense would score like early in the first quarter. They can. They showed that they can. But I more think it's like Penn State gets up and now Boise State has to throw the ball more than they want. Maybe Madsen gets hit. Maybe he panics. Whatever it is, I think that Penn State's defense can get another scoop and score in this game. And, you're almost getting 5 times your money. I like those odds. I'm going to take Xavier Guillory, plus 320. I saw that one, I believe, on DraftKings as well. A touchdown here for him. Look, this is just Arizona State playing comeback, having to pass. He's the most likely guy to score a touchdown now that Jordan Tyson is gone in terms of receiving. Scatterbo obviously is the most likely to score a touchdown, but his number is terrible. I believe it was like minus 210 where I saw it, so just not a very good number for Scatterbo. So let's go with Guillory with the Sun Devils trying to play comeback. And I'll go with the Ohio State running back Quinshon Judkins, minus 135. There's obviously going to be scoring in this game in the Rose Bowl. I think it's going to be fairly back and forth. And Judkins has, I believe, 11 touchdowns already this year. So he has a lot of scores. I think that's, you're still getting minus there. But another one, if you want to pair it with something, let's go ahead and do that. All right, let's get to the props here. I have only one passing prop, and it's going to be Quinn Ewers over 1.5 passing touchdowns versus Arizona State. It's minus 140. 3 games in a row with only 1, but he has 2 or more in 8 of 12 games. Arizona State is good in coverage, but they're good in coverage against the teams that they've played. And I know Quinn Ewers isn't playing his best ball right now, and the Longhorns have been running the ball more. But I think if you are going to make the step into the championship game, right, you're going to get past whoever comes away with that semifinal victory. I think you're going to have a confident Quinn Ewers. This is a good game to get his confidence up, right? Let him throw the ball a little bit, especially when you get a 10-point lead, a 14-point lead, something like that. Keep your foot on the gas. That's what Sarkisian does. All gas, no brakes, blah, blah. But keep your foot on the gas. Let this dude build up his confidence and throw a couple touchdowns before going in to the next couple rounds here. Let's go to the running back for Penn State, Kaytron Allen, over 52.5 rushing yards versus Boise State. Again, this is where I really dislike the tackling of Boise State and the lack of fundamentals that they've had, right? And part of it is because they hold the ball for so long in most games, especially against the Mountain West. They hold the ball. The defense has been pretty gassed up in most games. So I think in this one, if they're on the field a lot, the tackling's already bad. So it's going to be real bad late. And he's been ripping off some long runs recently. He averaged 8.9 yards per carry versus Oregon, 6.4 versus SMU, and he had longs of 32 and 25. And then with the total down here at 52.5, I think this is easily doable for Kaytron Allen. Let's go back to Quintrevion Wisner, the running back for Texas, over 86.5 rushing yards versus Arizona State. He's just been getting so many carries. I went over this the last couple weeks. It's an unbelievable and ungodly amount of carries. He did get a little banged up against Clemson, right? But they said that he could have come back in that game if it was absolutely necessary. It was just not necessary for him to come back in that game, and he had already passed his total prop last week with 110 yards. So, and he has hit this number in 3 of his last 4 games. So I think Wisner, we're going to just keep riding on that one. Let's go to Oregon, the running back Jordan James, over 81.5 rushing yards versus Ohio State. He had 23 rush attempts for 115 yards and a touchdown against Ohio State in the first game they played. And in my opinion, with the Buckeyes offense running as hot as it was against Tennessee, if you're Oregon, you want to hold the ball. You don't want to change everything you do, but you don't have to. You gave the ball to Jordan James 23 times last game, and last time you played Ohio State, and you won this game. I don't know how much you need to differ that, right? So let's run the ball. Let's control the clock. Let's keep that offense frustrated and on the sideline by controlling the clock. And by doing that, you're going to run the ball a lot with a guy like Jordan James. I think he's going to be able to easily pass this if they don't get down really quick, which I don't expect against Ohio State. I think that's going to be a fairly back and forth game. I'm going to go with Jeremiyah Love again. I just can't not do it, right? 65.5 rushing yards versus Georgia. He's gone over this in 5 of his last 6 games. 3 of his last 4 games, he's had rushes over 50 yards, 76, 68, and 98, obviously, in that game against Indiana. So he is not only, a big part of this offense. They have Price as well. It's definitely a dual threat, but he is picking up huge chunk gains at some point in the game to bury these teams. And, it's a tough game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Georgia is fantastic. I picked not fantastic. I picked the under in this game. But I do think that the smart thing to do would be to not let Riley Leonard pass this ball as much, right? You don't want to face this Georgia pass rush. You want to run the ball if you can. So I think Jeremiyah Love's going to get plenty of shots to run the ball, and 65.5, especially if he gets one of those big chunk gainers, is just not enough yards to contain him. I got 3 tight end receiving props and 1 wide receiver. I'll give you the wide receiver one first. Jordan Faison, the Notre Dame wide receiver, over 29.5 receiving yards versus Georgia. They schemed up 9 targets for him against Indiana. He had a season-high 41 snaps in that game. I just think Marcus Freeman is recognizing we need the ball in this guy's hands. He's an explosive playmaker. He'd been kind of limited before this game, but when the lights are on with everything on the line, they went to Faison a bunch. So I think that trend needs to continue. They're going to need some explosive plays, and Faison is a guy that can do it. The tight end receiving ones I have, Tyler Warren for Penn State. We're going to go. We had his touchdown call, but 74.5 receiving yards versus Boise State. They just didn't need him against SMU. You know, the defense scored twice. They weren't in sync on offense, but he's had at least 8 targets in 5 straight games before that SMU game. He cleared this total in 4 or 5 weeks before the SMU game, and he is the core piece of this offense, right? He is the biggest playmaker that they have. So I think you're going to go to him in crunch spots, 74.5 yards. I do think they need him a little bit more against Boise State than they did against SMU. So I will go on the over for Tyler Warren. I tell you what, a guy that I've seen a ton of this season, Matt Lauter, the Boise State tight end, over 25.5 receiving yards versus Penn State. He's hit this in 4 of his last 5. And the odds say that Boise State is going to be playing from behind. They're going to need to pass. They use him a lot in the red zone as well. Don't hate his touchdown call. I just don't think the number was good enough. I think it was still like plus 150 or something like that. I'd be looking at 200 for a tight end and a Boise State tight end against Penn State. I think is a tough. But I think the yards are very easily doable for him. And the last one we're going to go, Terrance Ferguson, the Oregon tight end, over 34.5 yards versus Ohio State. He had 8 targets in the last game against Ohio State, 4 catches, 62 yards. He's hit this in 6 of his last 7 games, and he's had at least 5 targets in 7 of his last 8 games. So I do think that game is going to go a little bit back and forth. It went over last time. I kind of expect it to go over again this time. So I think there's just going to be a lot of points in that game, and I like Terrance Ferguson to have some decent receiving yards. So that is everything for me for round 2. I will be back here on Monday with Terrell and Seth, of course, to break down a couple more bowl games and the playoff as well. So I will see you guys then. Remember, you can follow me at Bogman Sports. Tail me over at BettingPros and check out the BettingPros Discord as well. And I will see y'all next week. Have a safe, happy new year, and I will talk to you then. Take it easy, everybody.